This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, and welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about making chlorine last in the pool. One of the most frustrating things about pool care is when chlorine leaves the pool rapidly or is depleted rapidly, and then you have to add a lot of chlorine to the pool, which raises the cost of not only your service business, but for homeowners also maintaining their pool. This is a big budget item, and if you can make the chlorine last longer, you of course save money. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. First, I think I should mention why the chlorine level is important in a swimming pool. There are a lot of factors that coincide with the chlorine level, negative and positive. So let me just touch on the negative because I think that's where we should be focusing on. If the chlorine level gets too low or there's zero chlorine, that's a big problem because there's many things that chlorine does. It sanitizes the water primarily, of course, so it keeps it safe. So if you go swimming, the chlorine level is at zero or you have combined chlorine, it's not a healthy swimming environment and you're susceptible to get maybe an ear infection or to have bacteria get in your body. So that's one thing. The main thing is a safety concern. Secondary is algae and the water quality or the look of the water overall. So if there's no chlorine in the pool, you're susceptible to get algae in the pool. You're also going to be dealing with cloudy pool water. This leads to kind of a chain reaction, like a nuclear power plant when the reactor's overheating because they can't cool it. It leads to a lot of different things that go wrong. Well, the same thing kind of with the pool on a less dramatic scale, but having no chlorine in the pool is like a domino effect. So you have algae, cloudy water, it's unsafe to swim in. Since the water quality has dropped, the filter is going to be working harder, and that's going to impact the filter system itself. You have to clean the filter. And then on top of that, in order to get the pool back in shape, you have to add a boatload of chlorine into the pool to recover things, get rid of the algae, get the water from turn the water back blue and not cloudy, remove the combined chlorine in the pool. All these things are compounded just because the chlorine level got to zero. So this is one of the things that is frustrating because when the chlorine is depleted, all these things happen, and it's a negative thing, of course, for your pool care. And if you're taking care of 60 pools out there and 10 of your pools on your route you're struggling with because the chlorine is at zero and you're shocking the pool and you're cleaning the filter and you're spending all this time trying to recover this pool, it's a bad situation because it's going to take all of your time and energy. And homeowners taking care of their pool, sometimes they lose most of their swim season, because they're just fighting and trying to reclaim their pool to get it back to blue. So with all that said, chlorine depletion is very normal. Bob Lowry had this equation. Basically, you're going to lose 1 part per million of chlorine per day. So let's say you start the week on a Monday and you're at 5 parts per million. If you don't add any sanitizer to the pool, any type of chlorine from Monday till Friday, by Friday you'll be at 0. And the reason why he stated this is not really scientific to an extent where you can study it, and every pool is a little bit different. But he said this so you have an idea that the chlorine level is going to be dropping in the pool just by itself. There's other factors like a high UV index, pool use, the water quality, of course, is a factor. But the chlorine is going to be used up, and you should be aware of that fact. And this is one reason why cyanuric acid was invented, because before the invention of cyanuric acid, which is a stabilizer for chlorine, basically it protects it from the sun's UV rays. Before this was invented, you'd have to go to the pool every day and add chlorine because there was nothing protecting it from the UV rays. And if you're in Texas where the UV index is at a 10, there's no way the chlorine is going to last 3 or 4 hours in the pool without cyanuric acid. So one way to protect the chlorine, of course, is with cyanuric acid. This is your first line of defense, and it's kind of an essential element of pool care. Now, of course, you've all heard that high cyanuric acid is bad for the pool, but there is a tipping point, and there is some in the industry. There was a debate at one of the pool shows a few years ago, and they had a panel where like half the panel was like low cyanuric acid. The other half of the panel was like, it doesn't matter what the cyanuric acid is. If it's 200 or 300, it's not a big deal. And you have this field of thought, which I think in some respects, there is some merit to that. I mean, if you do pool care and you're using trichlor tablets and the cyanuric acid is at 200, yes, it's probably not a good level of cyanuric acid because the chlorine is, of course, working a lot slower. But if it's a pool that no one's using, let's say the person's 70 years old or 80 years old, they never go in their pool, doesn't really matter, I guess, at that point. In some respects, if you have a high cyanuric acid and you just have a really high chlorine level to counterbalance that. But in a lot of aspects, for instance, the Los Angeles County Health Department, the maximum level of cyanuric acid is 100 parts per million. They may be revising that, by the way, to bring that down. But it's one of those things where if the county says 100 parts per million is not good, then if the health department says it's not good for a public pool, it's probably not ideal for your residential pool. Now, the reason why they have these standards for commercial pools, and this is a little side note, is that for a commercial pool, you're worried about bather-to-bather disease transmission because you have a lot of people that you don't know that aren't your family, and they bring things into the pool and everyone's using it. And so there is a reason why they're really strict on a lot of their numbers with commercial pools to make sure that the sanitizer is extremely effective and fast acting. So the higher the cyanuric acid level, the less effective the chlorine is. It's not working. It just takes longer for the kill factor and things like that to be in effect. Now the pH is a factor as well, and that's why the health department is on having the pH at a lower level in the pool. So with that in mind, you have to also consider your backyard pool, but you have to also realize that you don't have a lot of strangers swimming in your pool. It's just you and your family, and you probably have the same, bacteria or whatever, the same body chemistry. I really can't phrase this correctly here, but you don't really get each other sick because you live with each other. If that makes sense. So it's not extremely critical in a backyard pool. And that's why the health department doesn't go to residential pools and inspect them, because it's just the family using the pool or one person or two people using the pool. And occasionally you have a party, and so that's when you have to worry about the bather disease transmission. All this to say that the cyanuric acid in the pool does protect the chlorine, and the recommended levels vary from pool pro to other pool pros. I like keeping my cyanuric acid in the pools at 50 to 80 parts per million, and it seems to be an effective level because the cyanuric acid level, just for simple mathematics, will protect the chlorine up until how much cyanuric acid you have into the pool. So for instance, if you have 80 parts per million of cyanuric acid, technically it should protect the free chlorine to 8 parts per million. If you have 50 parts per million of cyanuric acid, it should protect the chlorine up to 5 parts per million. And that's kind of like a basic formula. It's not extremely scientific, I don't think, but it's something that's been effective in the industry, and it's a good litmus for the cyanuric acid level and the free chlorine level. So if you have a cyanuric acid level of 30 parts per million and you shock the pool to 10 parts per million, about 7 parts per million will burn off within the first few hours. And that's kind of the case. That's in the middle of summer, I should say. and with a high UV index, it'll burn off because it's not being protected by the cyanuric acid in the pool. Again, how much is too much? Well, the more cyanuric acid you have in the pool, the higher the free chlorine level you have to keep in the pool. So if you're at 200 parts per million of cyanuric acid, you're going to need to keep your free chlorine level. If you use Bob Lowry's formula of 7.5% of cyanuric acid to free chlorine, you're going to need to keep the chlorine at 15 parts per million in that pool with 200 parts per million of cyanuric acid. That's a lot of chlorine, that's a lot of trichlor tablets, and I would consider that being overusing chlorine at that point to maintain that level at 15 parts per million because you have a cyanuric acid level of 200. Now, I'm going to back up a little here, and I'm going to talk about why the chlorine may dissipate in your pool faster. And there are some chlorine enhancers you can add to the pool to help this, but let me just say that the free chlorine level is really important, and it's not a free chlorine level for the week. It's actually a daily free chlorine level in the pool, and this is something that you have to consider. So let's just say that you have a free chlorine of 1 part per million in the pool. To me, that's pretty low, and the chances of you having algae growing in there or microalgae that's destroying the chlorine rapidly is pretty high. And if you start the week off at 5 parts per million and by Thursday you're at 1 part per million, chances are you're going to have to shock the pool and bring the chlorine level back up much higher than back to 5 parts per million, because you have to maybe break some of the combined chlorine in there, and you have to kind of get rid of some of the microalgae in the pool, and the chlorine may be destroyed rapidly because of those factors underlying. So it's best, in my opinion, to keep your pool at a consistent free chlorine level every day. Now, this is something that's a little difficult if you don't have a saltwater system where you can set it and the production is going to produce the same amount of chlorine each day. But this can be done with a combination of a chlorine type that you prefer, either liquid chlorine or cal hypo. In my area, liquid chlorine is favored. Florida, I think liquid chlorine is favored as well. Parts of Texas, cal hypo is favored. This is your primary sanitizer. And then you would have to use trichlor tablets, or you can use cal hypo tablets if you have those in your area. And this will release chlorine during the week when you're not there. So if you do pool service, of course, you're going to need to rely on the trichlor tablets, or maybe if you have a chlorine pump, you can pump the liquid chlorine into the pool. These aren't as common, and so trichlor tablets are really popular. In fact, trichlor tablets are the most popular sanitizer out there because they slowly dissolve and release chlorine in the pool over the course of a week. So you can do this 5 parts per million if you get this formula right. And I would suggest that you establish the pool at a pretty good parts per million, maybe go for like 8 or 10 parts per million, and then use the trichlor tablets to modulate that. So not necessarily do you have to shock the pool every week. I wouldn't recommend doing that because you're wasting product. But if you can maintain the chlorine level, there's no need to shock the pool at that point, and you're going to save a lot of money. So initially, bring the pool up to about 10 parts per million, maybe add 1 trichlor tablet, then test the water a week later to see what the chlorine level is at. And if it's at 3 parts per million, you may want to adjust that and add 2 tablets, or break a tablet in half and add 1.5 tablets. And yes, you can break trichlor tablets in half if you need to. And once you get it maintained at 5 parts per million, then you're pretty much set, and there's no need to really shock the pool and add chlorine to the pool. And that saves you a lot of money in the long run. And I call this the combination approach of sanitizing your pool. Trichlor in itself is not inherently evil. The cyanuric acid that it releases into the pool is not something that's not counterbalanced by a simple partial drain or by balancing it out with using another non-stabilized chlorine type. What I mean by this is that you're going to use a chlorine type like liquid chlorine, for example, HASA liquid chlorine, of course, if you're going to use that. And you're going to add this to the pool because there's no stabilizer, no cyanuric acid. So you could do a combination approach where you add some chlorine to the pool, use a tablet during the week. Maybe when you get back the next week, add a little bit more liquid chlorine to the pool, and then add a tablet. But you're not really shocking the pool. You're just adding a maintenance dose of the liquid chlorine. So you're not bringing the pool to 10 parts per million. Maybe you're bringing the pool to 5 parts per million. And that's kind of how you do it. You don't want to overuse the trichlor tablets because then you're adding so much cyanuric acid to the water that you're going to kind of compound the problem and have to add more and more chlorine, more and more tablets to the pool. And it's one of those things where it gets out of hand very rapidly. So the combination approach is a really effective way because you're not adding a byproduct or over adding a byproduct, I should say, like cyanuric acid, which is has a negative impact on the pool once it gets past a certain point. And again, it's debatable, but I would say anything past 100 parts per million starts to impact the pool negatively because you're actually using more chlorine product to maintain the free chlorine level in the pool. It's not necessarily something that's detrimental, but it is detrimental to your budget in some cases. And I know I spent a lot of time in the podcast about this because this is the crucial thing about the chlorine level of the pool. Once it drops down to 0, then you have loads of problems, and then you have to shock your pool and bring it back again, which costs money and makes you add a lot of product to the pool. So now that that's out of the way, let me focus on 2 things that you can do to make the chlorine last a lot longer in the pool. The first thing you can do, that's not going to really be something that you add to the pool, but it is something you do to the pool equipment. And number 1, actually there's 2 things you're going to do to the pool equipment. Number 1, you're going to clean your filter at the beginning of the season if you have a full-size filter, a full-size D filter, or a quad cartridge filter. And then number 2, you're going to run your pool as long as you can tolerate, or how long the customer can tolerate. So if there's a VS pump, you're running that pool 20 hours a day in the summertime on a low and medium speed. Single speed pump, you're going to run this pool as long as they can tolerate the electricity bill. The reason behind this is because the pool runtime, or the circulation of the pool, is a big factor on water quality. The longer the pool runs, and this is why commercial pools run 24 hours a day, is the longer the pool runs, the more the filter is working and the more the chlorine is being distributed in the pool. So if you're only running your pool 4 hours a day or 2 hours a day, or, I don't know, I guess that would be minimal for most people. I was going to say 1 hour, but that's pretty low. You're not going to have a lot of circulation. The chlorine is not going to be circulated to the water. There's going to be a lot of dead spots where algae is going to form, causing the chlorine to be destroyed rapidly. And so this is one aspect that a lot of people ignore or don't focus on. But the longer you run your pool, the less likely you're going to have problems with algae and with the chlorine level dropping really low. If you add of course, the recommended dosage, or the amount that you want to keep it at, 5 parts per million, let's say, and you're running your pool a lot, it's going to benefit the pool tremendously. So that's number 1. Number 2 is using an enhancer. Now, I don't sell any of these products directly, so I can speak freely of these enhancers and how effective they are. And I've tested all of them on my route at some point during the years using different methods. One season, I used phosphate and enzymes exclusively on the majority of the pools. So I would get a bottle of a phosphate and enzyme product and leave it at the pool side. I would charge the customer for it, and then I would add it every week. This was highly effective, and I still use this for certain pools. But to me, it's one of those things where you have one more step in your pool service. You have to add this. Now, if you're a homeowner, not a big deal. You check your chemicals on a Monday, add some phosphate and enzymes to the pool, and I can guarantee you that's going to really help extend the chlorine life in the pool for a number of reasons. But the phosphate remover is going to help remove at least one source of food for the algae, and the enzymes really help the chlorine work more effectively. Another method would be using the Pool RX. This is a proven, a product with a huge proven track record in the industry. And this is basically a mineral system that contains copper sulfate, pentahydrate, and basically these minerals will act as a way to prevent algae growth. You may say that, well, is that all it does? Well, yeah, that's really what it does. And why is this important? Well, if it can prevent algae and microalgae from growing in the pool, that frees up the chlorine to do more or do what it's supposed to do. And by doing that, the chlorine actually lasts a lot longer because algae and microalgae consume the chlorine, or the chlorine is used up rapidly fighting it, I should say. And the level drops rapidly when you have algae in the pool. If you do pool service, you know exactly what I mean. Any amount of algae in the pool will cause the chlorine level to drop rapidly. because there's a lot of algae that you can't see in the pool with the naked eye that's destroying the chlorine level in the pool. So basically, if you have something that eliminates algae growing in the pool, like the Pool RX, then the chlorine is going to be more effective. Kind of what the phosphate remover does, and the enzymes do, but on an easier scale because you just put it in the pump basket or skimmer basket and really don't need to worry about it after that point. And then the third thing you can do is add borates to the pool. I know a lot of suppliers have been buying borates so that the pool pros can use it. Boric acid powder is probably the primary one that you would want to use. It's easy to add to the pool and it doesn't really affect the pH negatively, and you can broadcast it in the pool safely. So the boric acid powder, if you have a borate level of 50 parts per million, it's going to prevent algae from growing because it's an algistat, which means it affects the algae on a cellular level and the algae can't form and grow in the pool. So it's one of those things where you kind of get a pattern here. You have the borates, you have Pool RX, you have the enzymes and phosphate. All of these are things that prevent algae growth and make the chlorine work more effectively. Now, borates have a couple other benefits. One is that it helps buffer the pH as well, and this will keep the pH from rising rapidly in the pool in most cases, and this will make the chlorine a little bit more effective when the pH is lower. And it also has a way of making the water sparkle a little bit more. So the water is going to have more of a sparkle with the borates in there. And there are, of course, other enhancers kind of that are out there that you can use also, like the Remington Solar chlorine-free sun shock. You can also use the Nature 2 system. Those are all effective as well. But these are the three main ones that I tend to use because they're easy to sell and they're effective. So the bottom line is that you have to look at a lot of factors, but the number one factor I think with making the chlorine last longer is to keep it or preventing it from getting down to near zero at any point during the season. Once it gets down to zero, within a day or two, you can have a major algae bloom, and then you're spending a lot of time recovering the pool. Now, if you have one of these enhancers in here, by the way, like a Pool RX or borates, and the chlorine does get to zero, this is a great insurance policy. I had a pool that I used to do. It was about 30,000 gallons, and they heated the pool to 95 degrees for a pool party. They didn't tell me they were having a pool party. I wasn't prepared for it. I certainly wasn't prepared for them to heat the pool to 95 degrees. And what happened was I got there on a Monday. This is the pool that I did twice a week, Monday and Thursday. I got there on a Monday, realized that they had this pool party. The pool was like really warm when I put my hand in there. And I checked the chlorine, it was at zero. But since I had two Pool RX units in this pool, had two different pumps, with each one had a Pool RX in it, this pool had no algae in it. So it is a great added insurance policy to prevent algae, and I would recommend having an enhancer just because they're affordable and they're going to extend the chlorine, and they're going to act as a pretty good insurance policy if the pool does zero out. Chances of algae forming are very slim if you're using an enhancer correctly. If you're looking for other podcasts, you can find those on my website, swimmingprolearning.com. On the banner, click on the podcast icon. There'll be a drop-down menu of over 1,600 podcasts there for you. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.